MFs, welcome back to Hustle Like You Broke. Matthew Walt coming at you every Tuesday and Thursday. Back today with my three co-hosts, Christine Dallas.
Hello, hello.
Kyle Hamilton.
A overcast Tuesday, still full keto.
And my brother Banks.
What's going on? Little brunch cocktail today.
We are recording a little later than usual. I am hoping you are not three sheets to the wind, but maybe close.
I've been drinking in moderation this morning.
Well, we appreciate your candor. So, before we introduce our guest today, I actually want to talk for a minute about the Event Safety Alliance, because we've been referencing them frequently over the last few weeks. Anybody who's been paying attention to the industry is aware of what's going on. They're aware of this move towards reopening. They're aware of these drive-in concerts that seem to be popping up. And the ESA published their reopening guide, and I commented on that recently. And I make a lot of reference to best practices and the need for more and for best practices to be truly established. I've been around this industry for almost 20 years. And the truth is, I have to claim some ignorance about the Event Safety Alliance. It's never been something that's been front and center in my world. And I got called out by a buddy of mine who basically said, you talk about these best practices, you really should read up on the ESA because they have published a guidebook that's 350 plus pages long, covering, the gamut in event safety and event management and venues and what would largely be considered best practices. And frankly, that got me thinking that I don't know how it's possible, perhaps it's my own ignorance that I got this far, but why have I been able to tour without promoters and agents talking to me about this guidebook or best practices? Why is it that my insurance agent, when I renew, doesn't reference anything relating to best practices or certification or level of education in the concert industry? And it got me thinking, is this guidebook a representation of best practices, or is it really just like good intentions or nice thoughts or something like that? And why aren't we talking more? Why aren't we talking about these best practices? So I just want to put that out there and preface today's podcast with that thought, because we are actually having Jim Digby from the ESA on our next podcast after today's. And I'm enthusiastic to hear what he has to say. I am hoping that he can enlighten me as well as our listeners. And I know that the ESA is a force in trying to enact these best practices throughout the industry. And certainly I am hugely supportive of those efforts and enthusiastic about seeing where all of this goes coming out so that we can have a better, stronger, safer music industry. And there it is. So with that said, today we're actually focusing on the creative side of the concert industry. We've talked a lot about technology with recent guests. We've talked a lot about the evolution of the industry. We've talked about audio, we've talked about lighting, we've talked about video, but we've never talked to a creative directly. And today we've got a great one. Very happy to have him here with us. The first time I worked with him, I was on the shop with the owner of one of the major automation and fabrication shops in this industry. And I won't say who it is, but I will say that when he heard that this gentleman was going to be involved, he basically said, "You're very fortunate to have the best and brightest, the future of creative design in the concert industry." And And I've found that to be the case. So I'm very enthusiastic to be introducing him. Cory FitzGerald has worked with everyone from Beyonce to J-Lo to Janet to Kendrick to Bruno to Kanye to Gaga to, if they've got one name, Madonna, the list goes on and on. Then Cory's probably worked with them. So Cory FitzGerald, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you so much. It's a very kind introduction. I appreciate it. And I appreciate working with you as well, all of you.
And I should add, I would be remiss not to say that while all of you out there cannot smell Cory, it was pointed out to me when I first met him that he actually is a very nice smelling gentleman as well.
I mean, not much I can do about that, I'm sorry to say.
I think there is. I think that actually it is one of those things that you do. It's part of your allure.
Well, I got to keep them coming back. So any way you can.
Well, anything to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, and we appreciate you very much. So there it is. So Cory, again, I've told a decent amount about you already, but if you don't mind, take us back to the humble beginnings of one Mr. Cory FitzGerald. I do believe or understand you went to NYU. I'm not sure if you're from New York, if you're from the LA area. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I grew up, born in New York, grew up there, and then moved to LA around 9, 10 years old, and kind of bounced back and forth for family reasons. But kind of grew up in the theater world. My parents were in the restaurant business, but always went to the theater and kind of hung out in that general area. And then when I was in California as a young kid, I started going to summer theater camp, but I didn't want to be an actor. So I made friends with the stage crew, and a friend of mine named James Shipper, who now owns Kinetic Lighting, offered to let me help him with that and kind of run Follow Spot and learn how to do a bunch of things there. And I kind of caught the bug and started working at my high school theater, the middle school AV club, anything I could do to get into, sort of nerdy technology and that side of things. Then I started working at a shop when I was 16, worked there throughout high school. And then, went to NYU, moved back to New York, started working full time and interning at wherever I could, various different companies. Ended up graduating, working for a company called High End Systems, which manufactured moving lights and control systems, and became sort of focused on the control end of side. So programming, working with Broadway designers, programmers, doing support and training, and then branching out into other types of shows, doing the support side and teaching people consoles. And then I sort of left there to go be programmer, doing programming, previs, all that kind of stuff for a variety of types of shows. Again, Broadway, off-Broadway, corporate, industrial, TV a little bit, and then kind of broke into concerts around 2006. And then kind of that's where I figured my life kind of changed and sort of decided that that's really where I wanted to be. Everything clicked and made sense. I'd always been a musician. So kind of being able to just light and program music freely without sort of having to worry about, the theatricality of where people were standing or the light and the shadow of a dynamic moment based on the audience perspective. It was really about the environment and the musicality of each look and each hit and how all that played together. Also combining it with my sort of theatrical past and training and stuff. So it kind of clicked, and I've kind of been doing it ever since. So about 15 years now, kind of full-time touring concert stuff, programming a lot. Went on the road for a couple years and kind of bounced between different gigs. I did Lady Gaga's first Monster Ball tour for about a year, and then did a couple other smaller shows, and then was introduced to a guy, a friend of mine who was the tour manager for the opening act for Gaga's show, Semi Precious Weapons, Sean Hoffman, who then said, "Do you want to meet with this guy named Bruno Mars, who's a sort of Hawaiian guy coming out of younger, new up and comer?" And I said, sure. And then kind of started working with him for the last 10 years. And the rest is sort of history, I guess.
Not a bad place to start.
It's the short version, yeah.
I will say, my AV guy in high school, first of all, the department was one person. I don't know if there was a club, but you couldn't have caught me with a 10-foot pole anywhere near this guy. He was 70 years old. He moved like a turtle from room to room. If you were waiting on him to get a presentation started or something, you were waiting a long time. It is hard for me to imagine starting there and being where you are today.
Well, every road has its every journey has its roads. I don't know. But it definitely wasn't. I think as I'm learning today in these sort of changing times, I didn't always set out to do this. I just loved what I was doing at the time, and it kind of led to one foot in front of the other. So there was always more to be done and more to be had. And I was, people often ask me like, well, what was the biggest decision, or how did you get there, or what was the best opportunity? And it's like really just being in the right place at the right time and being lucky, getting a call from the right person at the right moment to do the right job that kind of opened your eyes or opened another opportunity or introduced you to the right person. It's all kind of the universe has a way of sort of connecting all these things, I think, and it's been very fortunate, and I'm very glad it happened, but it was definitely a series of events.
And did I hear you say every journey has its roads?
Yeah, I was fumbling, so I'm not used to being, recorded like this.
No, that was a good play on Bret Michaels. I was imagining Poison covering your rendition of "Every Journey Has Its Roads." That was pretty good. Can you sing us a couple bars?
No, that's not going to happen.
Well, I was trying to picture then what you said. You were a musician, and I didn't know that about you either. And I'm trying to run through my head, and I'm picturing it, and I've narrowed it down to 4. So I want you to tell me how far off base I was.
Okay.
Now, one of me wants to say singer because I can picture you being in the chorus as a young lad, but I'm not so sure about that one. I picture you perhaps behind the cello. I also picture you maybe playing the clarinet, which led me to sax. How'd I do?
Well, surprisingly, you got 1 out of 3. But I would say the original journey was piano, then clarinet, then guitar, bass, and then drums. But for some reason, clarinet was in there, and I don't remember why.
I suppose I should have said something about piano.
Yeah, it's usually a good place to start.
Were you one of those like 3-year-old pianists going to recitals with your parents as a child?
I want to say 4, but I was no Mozart. Let's put it that way. It was a hobby.
How about that? So you started out designing for Bruno, you say, but what I learned before this call, and this is totally my own ignorance, is that I don't know you as a touring guy. I know you as a designer, and I know you as a programmer, and I'd seen your backstory. But as it turns out, I'm the one on this call who's most deprived, or perhaps the most fortunate, in that I'm the only one among our podcasters today that has not actually toured with you. Tell us a little bit about
that. For that,
I suck for that.
Yes.
I mean, you're missing
you
out.
Have
that's
not
for sure.
been blessed with Mr. FitzGerald's presence.
I'll second
I'm
that.
feeling a little bit. I am. I'm definitely
blatant disrespectful, sir.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean to be disrespectful. You know that about me.
With all due respect.
Anywho, I don't know what the fuck any of that just means, but Cory, please, or Kyle, since you seem to want to jerk Cory's chain a little bit, why don't you tell us about Cory's touring experience?
I can't tell you about his experience because you don't see him. He just shows up miraculously in the late afternoon.
Later than you?
About a tie maybe, but he just shows up like I just show up, and we do what we do. But
you did actually make reference to a term I had not heard before before we started. Now we were talking about you as the white glove motherfucker that you are, that we know.
Of course.
No, in love, no question. And Cory, I mean, if you've listened to our podcasts, you know that Kyle and Chris are big time white glovers, and I mean, I love them to death for it. But of course,
embrace it. You have to embrace it.
But I do enjoy.
Badge of honor.
There's a lot of hate. There's a lot of hate to people like us.
That's kind of what I'm saying. I mean, like the people who actually work for a living, they really don't appreciate that y'all just kind of stroll in late in the day and are like, "Hey, is everything all set up for us?"
But see,
Blah blah blah.
what you fail to realize is there's a lot of after work that happens as well. You know,
Blah blah blah.
file management, and not only that. I mean, just because we may have chosen a different path that affords us the glovage, you can't hate on that. Everybody's out is afforded the same opportunities. It matters if you take advantage of it.
I see. So other people have simply not
Hold
taken
on.
advantage of.
I just want to throw in there, back of house, we don't really have those options. Just, not to be, there's no really white gloving back there when you do like backstage work.
It depends on how you maneuver your set up your deal, but it's very
Thank
plausible.
you, Dallas. Thank you, though. I appreciate Dallas chiming in there because Dallas is a woman who knows a little something about working for a living.
So you're saying when you wear gloves, you don't work?
I mean, it might be what I'm implying. I don't know. Dallas, back me up. What do you think? Do they work?
They absolutely work. But
oh, geez, you can't play both sides, Dallas. That's bullshit.
I do respect the white glovers. I mean, you most have earned it. Not all, but most have. And we know who those are, so we give them their respect.
Well, now I'm just offended. This is a bunch of bullshit. That's all I'm going to say. Anyway.
No, but getting back to Mr. FitzGerald, he has a different kind of glove.
And that's what I was leading to. Please, what kind of glove does Cory wear?
Has reached a certain level of the platinum level, which is very few in this industry. He's close to like his own tour bus kind of level. So,
really?
With that being said, I just have to, bow down and give all much respect to Mr. FitzGerald because the few times that I've worked with him, especially when we worked on the Unbreakable tour with Janet, it was just an honor just to be in his presence.
Well, I mean, the honor is all mine. I truly appreciate it.
See how he just accepted it? I love it. That's what I'm talking about. That personal tour. You have a jet? You on a plane too?
No. I mean, some of the cost these days. I mean, why bother?
Nowhere to go and all.
So
exactly, all those seats and no one to go with. It's just why bother?
So basically, your security every day on this Unbreakable tour was looking in advance at the venue CAD for the next day and thinking, okay, where can we put Janet's A-Party bus? And where can we put Cory's bus? And then everybody else can go like outside the lot, down the road, what have you. This is correct?
I mean, I like to think of him more like a hotel kind of guy, but yeah, I mean, it's a shuttle bus, at least back and forth. It's a private entrance. Yeah, no, none of any of that. That's nonsense.
Private jets to the venue, to the hoodie. Exactly. PJs and hoodies all day long. Got it.
That's right.
This guy. Do you know something about terry cloth robes and leather slippers by chance?
Not really my style. I'm more of a hoodie and Converse kind of guy, but it seems nice.
Do you refresh your hoodie in a jasmine bag? Chris, what am I talking about now?
It's a enclosure that basically provides a special scent for your bathrobe or your pillow so that you're infused with whatever scent is to your liking. I prefer eucalyptus myself.
Very refreshing. Very refreshing.
Is this what you use as well, Cory?
I mean, do I have a eucalyptus diffuser in my house? Possibly. But do I have other fragrances I enjoy? Yes.
Pine needles.
Diffuser on the road to at front of house with you?
Sometimes.
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
Davey introduced us to that, and now there's little USB ones that are very refreshing. So,
do you have any kind of altar at front of house when you work?
No, I am very much a minimalist person. I know people who do. They shall remain nameless, but I think there's a certain amount of what's the word I'm looking for?
Je ne sais quoi.
Je ne sais quoi, exactly. That comes with it. The I don't know what. But people get comfortable. They have a tradition, a routine, certainly ambiance to make them feel comfortable. I typically come in and out of things so quickly now that I've kind of gone into the programming or just designing or overseeing or creative directing that I kind of come in, do the thing and leave. And so there really is not a lot of sense of bringing a lot of stuff with me. But, I'm a pretty simple guy when it comes down to it.
I just want to throw out that it's just us here. You can feel to throw out any names, throw anybody under the bus that you want. We won't tell anybody, I promise.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense.
On another question, Cory, slightly more serious level here. Curious, if you're coming up, having the fortune of getting an internship and being able to really get a view of this business from an early perspective, where some of us haven't had that opportunity. As you grow now and where you are now, how much of what you do is your own creativity, or is it manipulating somebody else's ideas and delivering something to them?
I think I answer this a lot the same way. Like every artist and every relationship is a lot different. So some people come to the table, very visually gifted as musicians. I'll talk about musicians specifically, but like some people have a very good visual sense. Some people have an idea that it's just, I love this reference and I want something like this, but not this. Sometimes they'll say, what do you think I should do? And have a kind of more of a blank page approach. And I think I've noticed that changes a bit with experience. So younger artists tend to be a little more influenceable about what they want to do, and may not understand what's possible. So it's easier to sort of suggest a few things and kind of see what road to go down. But that's not always true. Some people come out of a creative design or arts background where they learned how to draw at an early age, and they can be very specific about stuff. So um, it really depends. I think we're often also operating within constraints, whether it's, this is a festival run, this is an arena tour, a stadium tour, an award show performance, a late night show performance, a music video. Everything has its own limitations coupled with time and budget. So, we can build a physical structure inside of a size of a room that's everything you've ever wanted it to be, but we don't have enough time and we definitely don't have enough budget. So what can we do that's like that, or half of that, or has half the ideas? And that's where I think the design portion of it comes into it. You're not necessarily reinventing how light works or what video screens do or how great content can be this week or this new AR technology or we want to go zip line and fly around the whole arena. Like it's more about finessing all of those options in the world into what this show and what this idea needs to be, and then honing it down to say, well, this is really the most important part and this is the story we want to tell. And that, I think, the background of not only design and theater and learning about that process on a much smaller level, as I've come to find out, is really helpful in sort of interpreting those things. But also, I think growing up into those different levels and seeing and learning and watching other people do it, watching other designers deal with artists, watching them do it well, do it poorly, watching them deal with production managers, watching them deal with the audio team, the visuals team, and see how those conversations go and where to put emphasis and pick your battles and say, well, we really need this to work, to make the whole show look correctly, but it's getting in the way of the side fills or something like that. And I mean, those are small examples, but that's those processes. It's more about how you deal with things than necessarily um, what your demands are or what you're focusing on at the time. And it's all one big picture. So like looking at all those things at the same time and knowing where you want it to go in the end, you sort of need to sort of quickly use all that experience in a real time way to kind of make decisions and make conversations go well. And then I'll try to do it with a sense of humor. So that's kind of my long answer.
That was a good answer, actually. I want to stay on this for a second because I, I struggle with the concept of creative design and creative designers sometimes because I find, and you know me, I'm just a fucking asshole, so I'm going to say things that are just highly rude and inflammatory here. But I find that so many creative designers are little more than what I call pretty picture makers. And you seem to be taking a much more comprehensive approach to the overall production rollout plan and the many facets that are involved in bringing a creative process to life. So, walk us through that a little bit more, if you don't mind. I mean, tell us a little more about, again, be it an artist that has some idea of where they want it to go or not. I mean, tell us a little more about these considerations, where it starts, how it evolves, and where it goes in a best case scenario.
I mean, I think it's tricky, right? And there's definitely some people out there without that level of experience, or just or and they have creative and great ideas that don't necessarily know how to implement them, or bring other people, even including myself, in to help implement them. So there isn't really a right or wrong way to do the situation overall. It's just, I think, those experiences build upon themselves to teach you what worked, what didn't work, and that's part of the job, is learning from those, learning from people who've done it before you, learning to take advice, learning to talk to the vendors about what they think is possible in the amount of time. And I've certainly seen a rise, probably starting about 10, 12 years ago, of people coming to the table with, a little bit of show experience, but a lot of great ideas. And you've seen sort of who's made success and got traction and maintained, or shifted into different positions, whether it's video directors, creative producers, and where they sort of find that niche that they work really well doing. But it's definitely, you have to find the kind of right combination of people. And what we always try to do is, talk about, facilitating it, right? You can't just have a good idea. You have to be able to make it, or make it happen, or make something like it happen. And a lot of times I find people get sort of into the mode of just thinking outside the box, and anything's possible. And you go away for 6 months and you see the tour, in another city, and you're like, wow, that really didn't work. Like that. I see what they were doing and what they're trying to do, and for whatever reason, not being part of those discussions, whether it's budget, time, a variety of different things, constraints. Uh, some things just don't work out the way they do, and then sometimes you see the opposite. You see some really interesting ideas that sort of came out of nowhere, or from someone you've never heard of, and like, wow, that's like a really inventive way to do that. And maybe they did that because they had to fit it into a trailer, and that's all they could afford to take with them on the road, but they used it in such a new way that it really turns it around and makes it interesting. um, so there's no right or wrong way to do it, and there is no, hard and fast rule to get into this business, and there's no prerequisite for what you have to be able to do. But I think looking at, the shows you see and want to be a part of, and what you like about them, what you don't like about them, what you might want to change, what you might want to ask questions about, all that stuff kind of helps, I think, inform the participants, as well as the people who are actually seeing the show, the audience. What went into that, and it's usually a lot more than you think, even if it's a very simple idea.
So let me ask you, with Chris and Kyle on this podcast with us and as audio guys, I'm sure they want to know, do you care about the audio? Do you consider the audio in your designs?
Absolutely not.
I mean, well,
Don't
yeah.
lie now. Don't lie. If
That
the answer
chuckle
is
let you know
no,
right now. He like, hell nah.
um, I mean, I say this knowing that it has come back after my early years to bite me, of just sort of forgetting it, or not really considering it in the, like, oh, we can make a really cool shape. And you can't. So yes, there's definitely been, more focus on, when we start a show, we know it's going to be an arena tour. We know we're going to need roughly these size speakers and roughly this location. And I started getting in a habit of just drawing a big box, because I knew that was going to, whatever it looked like was going to go there, to kind of keep me aware that was going to happen. I certainly didn't do that in the beginning, but the more you kind of deal with that, particularly in stadiums, particularly, with I guess a festival or something like Coachella, you want these pretty pictures, you want these really pristine looks, and audio comes in and screws it up every time. Oh, I'm just kidding. But it has to be, though. I mean, you're there to see the live show, and you've got to hear the live show, and it's got to sound great. So, what do you do to sort of make that visually interesting? And a lot of the things you've been working on, in the last couple of years, moving forward, is sort of incorporating that into the room. Um, can we paint all the speakers the same color? Can we hide them within some kind of scenic baffling without affecting the sound? Usually the answers are no, or it's too expensive. But we try to do a lot of things that make a lot more sense. But we try. I mean, the same sort of goes true with video and iMac a little bit, but mostly like projection. Anytime you want to use something that's a little bit more complicated and requires certain things, you really got to lay it out ahead of time because you're eating up space up front of house, or if we're doing a gag that require if the front of house positions are split, or we're doing some kind of B stage, there's always a lot of questions and have to do with that, especially having unfortunately not gotten to do the show, but the Rage Against the Machine tour that was about to start was a lot of questions because they weren't going to use in ears, and then they were going to use in ears, and I don't really know how that ended up because I'm not in that department. But that was a big question of, do we have wedges all over the stage? I haven't had wedges all over the stage in a long time. Where do we want to put them? How do they look? Does anybody care? Is it a punk rock show? Like those are questions that are again specific to the band, but certainly revolve around audio and making it sound right, not only to them playing, but of course to the audience. So it is definitely a huge thing to keep in mind if you don't, which I'm trying to do better of, and I'm sorry if I've done anything to you in the past, which I'm sorry for.
So it sounds like you acknowledge, though, that audio is a detriment to your process. Is that right?
I mean, it's not a detriment, but it's one of those constraints you need to always be aware of, I think. And you get back and forth, especially in again, stadiums, 360, anything that's like really complicated, or um a bigger situation. It's just a thing that's going to have to be there. And you have to make sure you account for it visually. I know a lot of like famous U2 designs and Pop Mart and all that kind of stuff really like incorporated that into the set, and that became a really good thing. Now, whether it sounded good or not, I don't know. I wasn't there, but it looked good, and that I think those kind of collaborations are really important to kind of make something new. It doesn't just look like a festival stage with a bunch of speakers hanging on the side. So hopefully.
I see. And one more question along these same lines. Would you agree that when you're looking through a budget and you're trying to figure out the optimal design and presentation, the first area that gets cut is going to be the audio?
Um, I mean, no, I guess. Do I? I mean, I don't. I mean, you guys tell me more so than I would know. But I mean, audio to me seems like a fixed cost as far as we need this many speakers at this such and such a place at this such and such a type, and that's kind of, you don't really have a lot of flexibility there unless someone wants to make a brand change
I
or a
think that
song.
was in the past. Now, since visual is everything, I think audio is always the first thing cut.
Hmm.
I think we're the second thought. I think Cory is always the first thought, as far as creative and set and lighting and video, they start with you first now.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall for sure, there's definitely like, what is the aesthetic, what is the look of the show, and I know, I mean, we go back and forth all the time with gear and costs, trying to bring things down as much as we can, and usually where we get into a sort of event horizon where you get the show you want rendered and looking great, and then okay, we got to cut like half the lighting costs, and then you change a bunch of stuff, change video screens, whatever, re-render it. It's like, well, it doesn't look as good as it did before. It's like, well, yeah, because we had to cut half the stuff out. And then it's like, well, I don't like this anymore. Let's come up with a new idea that fits in the budget. And then you sort of start from a blank page again. So I definitely think there's the loop of creative design that's starts with that, and everyone, the first question out of anyone's mouth is how much does it cost. But I don't know. Yeah, everything always wants to get cut down. So I'm not sure where that ever ends, because we've also been a part of projects where between each leg they want to cut it down, and but by the time you end up, you're like sitting back at a bus in a trailer wondering whatever happened to all your video content.
So, Chris, Kyle, I mean, I just got to ask you guys now, like, if we were to have like a cage match tomorrow, would Cory be your adversary? Are you trying to fight him here or what?
Actually, the person who we want to fight is the one who's writing the checks.
Always.
Because at the end of the day, he's just doing what he's asked to do, but unfortunately, it always realistically infringes on our world and makes our world difficult because this is in the way. Can you move this? Can you put that here? Can you put this there? And then you're like, okay, well, nobody's going to hear that over there. Well, can you do this? No. Well, it has to be done. Make it happen. All right. And so we just get our hand. End up having to paint a Picasso with a hole in the canvas. So it makes our world that much more difficult. But again, it goes back to the person signing writing the check. So he's just the messenger per se.
Well, that's very disappointing. And I don't fully, I mean, I understand exactly what you mean by that, but it seems counterproductive to try and fight the person who's paying you. Um,
Yeah, so
Trying to
get
drum up
fixed.
some controversy here. Help me out,
No,
guys.
I think it's just how the industry has shifted. I mean, the days of just having a band on stage just playing a show with a couple of lights and some iMac are gone. The concert experience went to the next level, and it was all about how do you charge more, where you have to give people a better show. It has to be bigger, it has to be brighter, it has to be more grand. So the visual aspect is definitely trumped how sound and audio and where they fit in, which is understandable because we all have to get paid. We're all out there to make money and more money. So I mean, I don't think it's a point of finger and pointing and blaming. It's all about where the industry has gone and what's progressed.
Fair enough. So, Cory, let's talk about the next level, as Chris just mentioned. Certainly, technology has caused many advancements, resulted in many advancements, and the visual, the optics have been much more important to the entertainment value in the show. And certainly, technology plays a role in that. And so, as a creative, what do you see coming down the pipes? We talked to Ian Simon recently about some XR technology, advancements in virtual and augmented reality, extended reality, et cetera. How do you see that factoring into the next wave of concert production?
I mean, I think it has to, and it certainly will. I mean, the incorporating of AR stuff has already happened with the last BTS tour and a couple other things. Where you can see augmented reality in the iMag. I know everyone's been talking about it: XR, AR, VR, everything like that. I mean, I this current situation is only going to increase the timeline or shorten the timeline, I guess you should say, on when all that stuff is going to be relevant and ready to go. So the technology that was about 6 to 18 months away is starting to be used, last week, and it's rough, and that's, I think, from a manufacturer's perspective, people we've been talking to are certainly excited, and they want to get involved, and they say that we're pushing things farther than they expected it to be done, and that's good. That's when it's exciting again for them because they can kind of figure out how to get it ahead of where it needs to go. But we've definitely never seen anything like this where without an audience, we're trying to find out ways to create these live entertainment experiences, and it's going to push things way farther than it can be. I also think we're going to be seeing seen a trend, as you guys were saying, about one-upsmanship and trying to do the best thing and using new technology before anybody else does, because as soon as it's used, there are only a few other people that would want to try to use it differently or feel like it's already been overused. So these companies are competing with each other to outdo one another, and eventually we've gotten to a sort of point where everybody's got a very similar product that can all do very complicated things, but it's down to the creativity and how it gets used, and what the show looks like and how the person interacts, and how does it feel real time, or is it canned, or what is the artist interaction, the audience interaction. And now that we're sort of virtual, that's tenfold more complicated to figure out. But I think it's going to continue to an extent. I also think we're going to see, personally, a wave of kind of going away from that, where you're getting back to more traditional concerts, if you will, where it's more focusing on the music. I certainly hope so. I think I know we're not. I don't want to bog down in too many of my crazy harebrained theories, but the financial models, being what they're going to become, I think we're going to want to see a lot more interesting uses of less technology and less over the top expansion, and more about, like, here's the performance. I'm a singer, let me sing. I'm a musician, let me play. I'm a dancer, let me dance, and really focus the person's experience on that. We've grown and grown and grown to trying to make every show a Super Bowl, and I think we're gonna want that human experience, and not seeing a little tiny ant with a giant projection or LED screen. We're gonna want to feel close and feel intimate and feel that the music's live and it's being performed for us. And I think to me, I hope that's kind of a mental space we'll get into. I certainly at this point would rather go see a show at a club versus a stadium on a personal level, but that's just because I feel like that connection is a lot more relevant in these days. So we'll see. I mean, I think the technology is there, and the people are there that want to see it. It's just a question of making it work in a mass scale, or setting up a big over the top show that people can come to and want to come to. So we'll see what sort of develops, but it's still going. I mean, people are still developing new products and new ways to use it, especially over the internet, which is going to be a whole new thing. I mean, AR and VR alone are going to sort of change the way we see concerts, as well as when we're seeing them live. I mean, U2 did a little bit of stuff with the AR. A lot of bands have done different ways of using it, and I think it's the creativity on how you spark that and make them new and interesting, and make me want to use that, or make me want to watch something through my phone that makes me feel like I'm really interacting with it is going to be challenging.
What's funny, I was going to ask you if it's the creative or the artist that introduces, whether or not to bring in the XR elements, but then you started talking about things going back to basics, and it is an interesting duality, right? We've got the technology to do any number of new and different things that no one's ever seen before, and then there's this drive for, I don't know if the word is authenticity, where it's just the artist and their songs, the band on stage doing what they do without, quote unquote distraction, for lack of a better term. But then you're talking about using technology to create a minimalist approach, which just presents so many different ideas. I'm not sure where to go with that, frankly.
No, I think it's two different things, in a way. I mean, you're going to see people and audiences wanting a more, I think music heavy show, new songs about topical things. I think pop music's gonna shift a little bit towards, you can't really talk about life anymore without confronting the situation we're in. So, you also want to feel good about stuff. So you don't want to be talking about, the downtimes, but you want to be entertained and you want to feel hope and all those things. I think it's a cultural thing, and we'll see it, and I think it's going to be good and positive. It's just we want to be entertained, and we want to talk about the positive things that are happening and hear new songs about hope and the future. And I think all that stuff is going to make us really um, a better society overall. But I think there's a lot of people out there trying to figure out how to connect with their audience again, and how the audience can connect back with them. Um, so it's a bigger question than just live shows, but I think it's a definitely interesting time to see where certain people go, and the audience, what the audience is really craving.
So, looking to the future and trying to figure out the best way to come back from this, and trying to understand not only the artist's desire, but the audience's desire, the audience's experience. I mean, where do you see things going in terms of, the reopening of concerts? How do you feel? I guess first about the concept of one drive-in shows and whether you've had any involvement in that, and two, how do you feel about the reopening? With distancing measures in place, and how that's going to affect the overall creative process.
I mean, you want the good news or the bad news?
Oh,
No, I think it's going to be very interesting to see. I mean, no one really knows what's going to happen, even if they tell you they do. We'll see in the next few weeks, as we've said for the last 2 months, what these measures and opening up things start to do. I think we should all very much rely on our, safety science officers and state and local governments to kind of say what they think they should do. But I think as an industry, it's going to be interesting. Um, to see what's possible, because a lot of the articles I've read and people I've talked to, the capacity issues for restaurants, for bars, nightclubs, venues, stadiums, are really prohibitive for the cost models that have been in place for a long time. So I think not creatively, but I think on the gear side it will suffer, and rehearsal side, and a lot of the things that make these spectacle shows so much bigger and amazing and larger than life is we're gonna have to start cutting that back because we're not going to be able to sell enough tickets or over enough time, which is the bad news. But I think it opens up a new area of creativity on how to do things at that scale. I mean, the drive-in thing is, I think, a pretty good, an interesting idea. I think it'll suffer some of the same financial questions of what makes sense. What does that ticket include? How do you do? Can you do virtual meet and greets? Can you do recordings of the songs, recordings of the live shows, per night, so that there's some connection there. I think there's a lot of ideas being floated around, to sort of look at that model. I know some have been tried in Europe and people are trying them here, uh, but it'll be interesting to see. I think what that does, overall. It's just the scarier part for me is the traditional way we've looked at the venues. In the capitalistic idea of all these economies were working at their maximum. And if we come back and say, okay, you can do the same thing, but you have to do it at a third capacity, it doesn't really make sense. Like the back end doesn't make sense with the front end. So we have to sort of wait and see, I think, when we can get back up to that. And obviously, if we talk vaccine treatments and people are far more comfortable and the government starts opening back up, I think there'll be a rampant, craziness about trying to get all the shows back up at once, because there was a lot of shows mid tour, starting tour. You know, we had shows in the gate programmed, ready to go, that are ready to go as soon as we get dates booked. But I think it'll be very closely watched on how those things go. And once that does start, just watching it again to see that it's safe and people want to go and, feel comfortable. I think venues are going to need to undergo quite a bit of updating as far as access points and health and safety. And I'm sure there'll be rules for that. And that's why everyone's put that on the back of the list to say we'll get to that once we've established we can make everything else safe. Um, but I'm hopeful, very hopeful, because I think that's how all of us make our money. So it'll be interesting to see what eventually develops.
So we opened today's podcast talking about best practices, or I did at least. I'm curious your thoughts on any additional best practices that should be considered coming, as the industry comes back, when it comes back, assuming it comes back to some fully formed concept that, includes a large scale gatherings in the relative near future, I hope. Any thoughts?
I mean, first of all, I don't want to be too negative. I mean, was listening to a great, podcast of a medical expert who I can't remember the name of, but they were like, theaters came back after the Spanish flu. Nightclubs, bars came back. We've lived through these things before, and we will develop a way to go back to a socialized normal life. How long it takes might be debatable, but I think I have no doubt that we're going to get back to something that we recognize as what we used to. It's just going to feel and look a little different, and we as this generation are never going to forget this moment. So I think that'll be interesting also to see as people develop. I think safe practices in our business, besides the obvious of washing your hands and not coughing on people. I think just
Wash
ta-
them hands.
taking
Hands.
health in
Platinum
general. I
hands.
mean, a lot of that's right. How do you keep them clean? Keep them in platinum. Um, the the health and safety in general, I think, is our lifestyle choices have not been the greatest. Certainly mine, alone, but the keeping mental health is a huge thing. Um, Sleep is a huge thing. Hopefully this break has sort of showed a lot of people that life, can be more than just about, uh, doing the show, staying up all night, getting on the bus, drinking till you fall asleep, and doing it all again the next day. Not that I ever did that much, but the I think it's going to be helpful overall for everyone to kind of take a step back and look at, um, what they're doing. A lot of people are looking at other ideas of careers, or do they want to go back to this if it comes back? I mean, I've had a lot of interesting conversations with people who I think are confronted with this, this disruption that they were never expecting, and it's kind of opened a lot of doors to say, oh, maybe there's other things I want to do. Maybe I want to teach. Maybe I want to farm. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of, really interesting opportunities out there. And a lot of us have been doing this so long and so fast, we don't really remember any other way. So, um, I think coming back is a good practice to kind of keep everybody safe, keep everybody on a good schedule, where we've been trying to cram as much information and time, that we can get going at the same time. But I think hopefully that's given us a little bit of a breath to think about it.
Hey, Corey, I had a question. Do you, in your conversations and models and different things that you guys have talked about with your clients, have you guys considered the consumer and what the consumer will be prepared to pay for at the end of the day? I mean, you mentioned AR and VR and different things like that. I was just curious about in this current state that we're in and how devastating it's been to a lot of people. Do we consider what the person who goes to a concert will be able to afford, once this is all said and done?
100%. I mean, that's a huge component of it. I mean, if you look at the math models of what a ticket costs and what it gets you now, and what those production costs are amortized out over however many shows in so many cities with so many tickets being sold, and you start chopping those, if you just say chop them in half, and then the people coming in, you can't offset that. You can't say, well, I'm going to have a 1,000-person venue with 500 people or 25 people, whatever the allowances, excuse me, and then say, well, we're going to charge those 25 people 100 times more than they normally would have cost to make up the difference. It just won't work that way. So I think the input and the output are going to have to level off very quickly, and that's why I think returning to a more traditional or I loved my idea a couple weeks ago of the supergroup model, or the Jingle Ball style festival model of like a lot of A-level talents making a big show in various cities all the time, because you'll be able to share a lot of those costs, and it becomes more about the performance, the music, the camaraderie. Everyone gets to see a lot of their favorite artists at the same time. So I think those types of things will become more feasible as we get closer and closer to reopening. You also, you have less crew, you have less load-ins, you can keep it set up for a couple weeks. There's a lot of different ideas, not just that I've had, but floating around, that I think will get worked out. But it's definitely going to change the way we can pay for and do these shows, and it's going to have to be consumable, so the people coming to it have to be able to afford it. And I think they'll want to, but that's definitely a reality of where we should be looking, and keeping that in mind as we, just like everything, seeing the whole picture before we sort of make final decisions about what we want to do on either end.
Do you think artists will be willing to take less money to do more of those festival style, radio style, jingle ball style events?
I mean, I don't want to speak for them, so it's very, very hard to say. My suspicion is there will be opportunities to do stuff like that, and people can choose whether or not they want to or can partake. But I don't know. I have no one is That's not like a real thing that's happened. It's just in my head that would be an easier financial model to sort of support, than doing your own. The startup costs alone might not justify the ticket sales. So it's very hard to look at a show on the long run like that and say, we'll definitely make our money back if we get into this, and spend 100, 2 million, 15 million, whatever dollars it's going to cost to get the show we want. It might take us 5 years to make that back, as opposed to 6 months or a year. So it's really going to come down to the individual artist for sure. And I think there'll be a lot more connection with the audience on how that works, and why.
I'm intrigued by that. I don't dislike that. I mean, I think sharing a band for artists that's that certainly has been done before, and perhaps could come back as a way, cost saving measures, shared backup band, shared crew, that sort of thing. Kyle's favorite thing, of course, is making extra checks on the same show.
You got
So,
to double dip, triple dip, diversify your bonds.
and of course, he means by taking proportionally less,
No,
not more.
hell no. I'm not here to save millionaires money. Give me my money.
You see how your way flies in the face of what Corey and I are proposing?
No, if I'm mixing two artists, I get two checks,
Selfish motherfucker,
or
right?
I'll walk away and let them do what they do. Corey's designing a show for everybody. He's charging his money. He's not cheap. Why do you think he has platinum gloves?
Well, I thought he was saying that he was going to take less money to
Oh
do
hell
these
no! He's
nasty.
taking more money.
Come on,
See,
Corey. Did you
Matt,
say that?
Matt, Matt and I have known each other for a long time, and he seems to always think I'm saying I will take less money, which I've never said in my life. but that's okay.
Exactly.
It's
I
the only way to
understand
negotiate
why
with.
cats try to make people save cheese. I mean, look at it like this: the money you're saving on flights, you're saving on hotel rooms, you're saving on all kind of incidental stuff. But the performance is what it is. You still got to pay for that. So if one person is mixing 3 artists, then that's 3 checks. You're saving on 3 hotel rooms, 3 flights, bus space, catering.
Per diem.
You know, hey, I'm not one you save money on.
I mean, you get one pair of white gloves to dry clean instead of 3, so it totally makes sense.
Exactly. Your carbon footprint is smaller.
We have talked about sustainability. Let me ask you that, actually, Cory. That's actually an interesting question. Have you been asked to look for more sustainable means of designing tours? Have you ever been asked to consider the power output of the equipment that you're using or anything like that?
Oh yeah, I mean, all the time, and even as simply as we want to use less trucks, less fuel, and use that as a sustainability measure, a carbon footprint offset, all that kind of stuff. So, generators, not only for cost but for output. Using materials that can be reused again, if possible, or the biggest question is always rental items instead of built items, and trying to be as least customizable as possible. And it sort of obviously ties in with cost, but it's also a mental thing of thinking about the environment a bit. But certainly, I mean, everyone's, I think, a bit cost conscious and environmentally trying to be as environmentally friendly as possible.
You say everyone is. That sounds very idealistic, but I'm not sure I agree. I like the way you're thinking, but walk that back. Did you just say you think everybody is trying to be cost or sustainable
I
and
think
consider the
I
environment?
mean, I certainly want to speak for the people I work for. If there's an option to be beneficial to the environment as well as costs, they're going to go for that. I will be specific and say they are more likely going to go for the cost saving option. But typically, it helps the environment in that sense of reduction of overall use is going to be good for anyone. I mean, no one's trying to burn coal generators instead of diesel, but the less number you're using, certainly the better off everyone is, both environmentally and financially.
I appreciate that. I would say I think our president might like the coal option if you were to
Yeah,
present that,
and
but
I
we're not a.
I will go on record now as saying I have not, and probably will not work for him.
I can appreciate that too. Well, Cory, you've been fantastic. We usually wrap these episodes with a series of quick questions, and you can be as brief in your answers, or you can take as long as you like. But tell us, what was your first tour?
My first arena tour was the Madonna Confessions tour in 2006.
So tours that predate arenas don't count.
I mean, like the first rock and roll tour I really was involved in. I did a lot of other shows, out different types of programming, different types of lighting, but the first pop star show, yeah, I would say that was my first big one.
I've actually been interrupted by Dallas just now, who wanted to ask actually a really good question before I resume with the short and simple ones. Dallas, please.
I was just wondering, in respect of the hardest gag or gig you might have ever had to create, for one of your previous shows. What can you tell us what that is?
That is a good question. They're all pretty difficult. I think one that well, gag or let me think. The One of the hardest days I had was I was programming the Beyonce Miss Carter tour, and we rebuilt the whole new album into the show for the first time, and did a sort of dress rehearsal, and then got a new set list that changed the entire thing around. Pretty much every song changed places, and I worked for about 45 hours straight from the time I woke up to the time the actual first show was over, fixing that, and that was kind of the hardest thing I did up until then. But the show went fine, and then the next day we switched it all back. So it was interesting but that was just one of many experiences like that I live to love and love to have lived, but don't necessarily want to do again.
Good question, Dallas. So, Cory, what would you say if you had to choose one was your favorite tour?
That is a much harder question because they've all been really interesting. I think the first, I can't really pick favorites. I mean, I loved my experience on that Madonna tour. To be honest, I loved my experience throughout the Lady Gaga world as she was exploding, and we were all being risen and part of that. But I loved my the first Bruno tour was really fun because I was kind of just me, myself, and I was left there, at the end of the night with just me programming, designing, kind of coming up with looks, working directly with him, and kind of getting on the same page, getting onto his aesthetic, and then running it for that year and a couple years after. We sort of built up after that, but it was a lot of fun. There's no time code. There was very simple, cool, cartoonish video looks, and it was just music. And he would change stuff every day, and he expected me to keep up with them, and it was a lot of fun. So like that was one of the more interactive and really dynamic shows that would just keep changing and keep being more and more fun.
Nice. Can you identify one moment as the best?
Oh boy. I don't know. They're all so many. I mean, it's a tough one.
I was thinking, Cory, your most favorite thought might have been when we were sitting in that restaurant in Paris after we completed that fun little thing we did. Do you remember that?
Probably.
It was after the HBO OTR thing.
Oh,
yeah. We
yes.
had that incredible dining experience. And I think we even had a politician near us.
I think so. Didn't we almost get robbed, if I'm not mistaken?
No, we didn't get robbed because there was a lot of police presence due to the U.S. Secret Service. I think we actually fed the Secret Service. That's what we ended up doing.
That makes sense. Yes, That is very,
Yeah.
yes. There's been one of my favorite Christine Dallas moments is her bringing me a carrot cake and a bottle of moonshine at probably 3 a.m. on my birthday in the middle of the stadium in Miami. And I spent the rest of the night programming by myself, eating carrot cake, drinking moonshine. So that was a great birthday.
Excellent. Glad I could do that for you.
Nice. Well, better than Dallas' cryptic moment. Thanks for not sharing us what that's all about. So, Cory, we're winding down here. Any advice that you'd like to impart on our listeners?
I think I sort of may always say this, but never say no to an opportunity, good or bad. You pretty much learn something from every chance you can. So I whether it's the biggest bar mitzvah in town or a stadium tour, there's nothing wrong with doing a gig that teaches you something, and I think there's no gigs out there that won't teach you something. So keep trying, and if that's something you want to do, keep focused and never say no to an opportunity.
I like that. I'm not sure I agree with that, but I like that.
What if the budget is low?
Oh, they say no. Yeah, of course, obviously.
Definitely. Okay. Any shout outs or parting shots?
No. Well, I mean, thank you guys so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to staying attuned to future episodes. And this is awesome.
Well, we appreciate you, Cory. You are welcome back. You really are one of the greats in the design world, and we're certainly happy and fortunate to have you. Appreciate your time, appreciate your candor, your sense of humor. And do you have any socials that you can share with our listeners?
I do. I don't usually check them or use them, but I will. I think it's we at the @Silent House one and the @Cory FitzGerald. I think it's all one word. That's how much I use it. But feel free. I'm always around somewhere. If you can find me, reach out, and I will be there.
Well, there it is. Another working class hero in the can. Appreciate having him on the show. Some great stories, some great experience. We appreciate our listeners. We look forward to hearing your questions. You know where to find us at HLUB Podcast on the gram or at hustlelikeyouBroke.com. Always feel free to hit us up, DM us, email us. let us know your thoughts. And we will be speaking to Jim Digby next. So we appreciate everyone tuning in. Thank you very much.